Good afternoon. My name is Ed Flynn, and I am the Chair of the Committee on City, Neighborhood Services, and Veteran and Military Affairs. I want to remind you that this is a public hearing. It is being recorded and broadcast live on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and webcast on www.boston.gov/city-boston-TV. Please silence your cell phones and other devices. We will also take public testimony and would appreciate it if you could sign in to testify. At the start of your testimony, please state your name, residence, and affiliation. Today's docket is docket 1233. The matter was sponsored by the mayor and was referred to the Committee on City, Neighborhood Services, Veteran, and Military Affairs. I will read docket 1233 for the record. Message in order to accept and expend reimbursement up to the amount of $4,300,000 from various government agencies, including the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, for expenses related to the March 13th/14, 2018 snowstorm. We will start with docket 1233 regarding the reimbursement from various government agencies, including FEMA. At this time, I'd like to introduce the administration officials that are present here today. Linda Frowley, Risk Management Director, and Eamon Miller, Training and Exercise Coordinator, Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. Would you like to make an opening statement? And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Well, we're here to request approval to accept the funds from FEMA, as you described, to reimburse the city. It's actually for 75% of our costs that were incurred to clear the snow from the public ways for the March snowstorm.
Yeah, and I'm Eamon Miller. I'm from the Office of Emergency Management. While we don't put in the official request, our office to FEMA, we play a role in the actual response during the storms.
Thank you. And could you give a little bit of background information on your job duties, Eamon, and how the city is working with other city departments on major snowstorms, what the coordination is like with maybe with the state government, what the coordination is like with various neighborhoods across the city, and how is that interaction going, generally speaking?
Sure. Well, the official mission of OEM is to enhance Boston's capacity to protect against, respond to, and recover from major emergencies. So this is both, it's an all hazards approach, so it's both man-made emergencies as well as natural emergencies. So we work in close partnership with not only the public safety groups, agencies, police, fire, EMS, but all city agencies to really do this work. And so, yeah, one of our big coordination pieces is operating the Emergency Operations Center that serves as a location where we coordinate the operational response with all city departments. And so for the storm, we had various agencies all at the Operations Center, and so it's an easy way for us to communicate effectively throughout the storm, all agencies.
What is the message that your office or the city brings to residents prior to a snowstorm in terms of what can they expect, what should they prepare for? I'm concerned about those maybe having a difficult time getting in and out of their house, maybe the elderly or those in the disability community. I know the mayor's office does a lot of outreach to our elderly, to our disability community. But, what is the message? How are we effectively reaching them?
Sure, sure. I mean, well, the first thing is we do coordinate with the Elderly Commission as well as the Disability Commission on that, on those preparations. But we also are responsible for the city's alert system too. So there are texts and phone calls that get sent out before a storm. We also rely heavily on the mayor's press office to get that message out as well.
What type of outreach would you do to people in public housing? What message would you get to those living in public housing? How can you effectively communicate with them? And if there are supplies that they do need during a snowstorm, how can we reach them as well?
Sure. I mean, I think we do rely heavily on those alerts. But we also, again, at the EOC, we do have representatives from public housing, depending on the storm. So they'll reach out to their networks as well and to their folks to ensure that those folks are getting the message as well. Again, we do work close with ONS to work in the mayor's office to get that message out as well. But we do definitely work with BHA on those things as well.
And during snowstorms, I do see the hard work up close of our public works personnel, our police, our firefighters, our EMTs. They're working hard. A lot of them are working double shifts to stay on top of the job. So, as a city, I know we're very proud of our city employees that really do so much great work. Almost at times, they're not home with their own families, but they're really protecting the city of Boston and the people in the neighborhoods. It's a great feeling to see that up close.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. And Linda, do you have any final comments or anything that?
No, we participate in the financial part of the EOC, but really I step in after the fact when there's FEMA reimbursement such as this to pull together all the documentation to support the request.
And is this funding, it's federal funding from FEMA? Is there other federal money besides FEMA?
Not for this event. We word it as sometimes other agencies step in and it also comes through MEMA. It passes through. We work very closely with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency in identifying eligibility and providing the documentation.
When there is an emergency declared, it's declared by the governor, and then the governor formally notifies the federal government that there is an emergency, and then at a certain point you can request federal assistance?
Correct. So it's the governor that declares a state of emergency, and then at that point, based on the like Linda said, the criteria that MEMA has that would qualify for public assistance, the governor would then request that public assistance from the federal government. Or at least make us eligible for it. Sorry, we do the requesting, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And at this time, if there is anyone here that would like to offer public testimony, hearing none, I just want to say thank you to Linda and thank you to Eamon for being here, for your hard work and dedication, and your great work representing the city of Boston. At this time, this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you. in session, I will read docket 1416, message in order approving an appropriation of $809,500 from the Edward Browne Fund for projects that will ornament the city's streets, ways, squares, and parks. At this time, I'd like to introduce the city administration officials that are present here right now. Drew Smith, Senior Deputy Treasurer, First Assistant Collector Treasurer, Treasury Department, and Rich DiPiano, Senior Research Analyst at the Treasury Department. Would you gentlemen like to give an opening statement?
I'd be happy to. Thanks very much. Chairman, I'll be presenting today on the Browne Fund Appropriation Order, which of course I know that you've had a chance to review. You may be familiar with this particular appropriation order, as this is an annual appropriation requested by Treasury from the Edward Ingersol Browne Trust Fund, or fund in accordance with the terms of Mr. Brown's will, which, as you'd mentioned, supports the adornment and beautification of Boston through the development and placement of fountains, statues, and monuments in public spaces. To give a little bit of background, the fund has been in existence since 1892 and has been available for appropriation since 1972. In accordance with the will, there exists a committee that accepts and reviews applications for funding requests from various community groups and makes subsequent recommendations to the Browne Fund Commission, which consists of the mayor, the collector treasurer, and the senior member of the city council. Once that commission makes its funding decisions, those are then presented to city council for appropriation, and that's why we're here. Working within a budget, the committee and then the commissioners have selected project funding in a total amount, as you'd mentioned, of $809,500 for 10 distinct projects, and I'm happy to give a brief description of each of those now. Would you like me to stop after each one so you can ask additional questions, or just read through them?
You could read for them.
Great.
Yep.
So $24,500 would go to the Foundation for the Preservation of 20 Arlington Street for landscape improvements and lighting to the passive open space located at the Arlington Street Church. $225,000 would go to the Fund for Boston Neighborhoods, specifically for the fabrication and installation of a memorial honoring the victims of the Boston Marathon bombings. $50,000 will go to Rosie's Place for the fabrication and installation of a memorial honoring Kip Tiernan, a relentless activist who fought for economic and social justice in Boston and the Commonwealth. $25,000 to the Friends of Elliott Norton Bay Village Parks for the design development of landscape improvements and restoration to Bay Village Park and Fountain. $100,000 would go to the Nonquit Street Land Trust for the refurbishment of the Nonquit Street Park Green and for the fabrication and installation of a piece of public artwork there. $120,000 would go to the Friends of Memorial Hall for the design, fabrication, and installation of ornamental fencing surrounding Memorial Hall in Charlestown and lighting elements for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Garden and monument honoring Charlestown residents who gave their lives for their country. $45,000 would go to the Puerto Rican Veterans Square Association for the design, fabrication, and installation of an ornamental gateway to be located at the entrance of the Puerto Rican Veterans Memorial Park in the South End. $50,000 would go to the Frederick Douglass Sculpture Committee for the landscape design development to the open space surrounding the planned Frederick Douglass sculpture located along Tremont Street in Roxbury. $20,000 would go to the Roxbury Path Forward Neighborhood Association for the design development to create public art in the Gertrude House Park to celebrate and honor the many individuals who have contributed to improving living conditions and social equity during the Civil Rights era and beyond. And finally, $150,000 of this appropriation would go to the Freedom Trail Foundation for the creation of public art adjacent to Faneuil Hall, commemorating Africans and African Americans sold into slavery on Merchants Row. and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about any of these or about the fund generally.
Yeah, thank you for providing a description on each of the recipients. On the second one, the Fund for Boston Neighborhoods, the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, can you give a little bit of background about that project?
I'd be happy to. I'm probably going to turn it over to my colleague who has been involved in trusts a bit longer than I have. He could probably give a bit better background. Thank you.
Councilor Chairman, the Browne Fund Committee and this body had appropriated $350,000 last year for Phase 1 for this very project. The Fund for Boston Neighborhoods, along with supporters of the project, came back to the Browne Fund seeking additional funds for Phase 2 and for the completion of the project. This project will be supported with funds not only from the Browne Fund, but from the Boston Redevelopment Authority as well. It will sit along Boylston Street at 2 sites, of each site along where the bombings occurred.
I would like to add just a little bit of information to that. So this is certainly not the first funding round that we've committed money to this project for. The project has changed a bit in design since 2017, since we were here last year. The artist has been working with the families of the victims to make sure that he's able to incorporate them into the design process, and they have changed it a bit because of that. We expect that this will be done by Marathon Monday of 2019.
Thank you. The Friends of Elliott Norton Bay Village Park, restoration to Bay Village Park and Fountain. Can you give a little bit of background information on that project?
Certainly, let me just get there. Sure, so this particular project received a lot of community involvement. There was a lot of community support for the project when we were actually receiving their proposal. Originally, they had requested $40,000 from the Browne Fund, but didn't necessarily have a complete idea of how exactly they would like to have spent that. We instead determined that they had work that needed to be done on a fountain there, they had work that needed to be done on a fence there, they had some landscaping work that needed to be done, and we thought they might be best served and spoke with them about it, and they agreed by giving them funds to work with a landscape architect to kind of develop a master plan for exactly what it is they're wanting to do. So the $25,000 here would go for that. They may in fact come for future funding if that project grows larger, but that's what this $25,000 would go for.
No, thank you. I know it's a beautiful park.
It certainly is,
Right.
yeah. And they're very proud of it. There's a lot of community involvement in that park.
Yeah, there is. I noticed that. My wife and I went to a reception there several weeks ago when we walked by that area, and you could see the pride the residents of the Bay Village had for the park.
They certainly take care of it.
Right, right. The Friends of Memorial Hall, Charlestown, honoring the Vietnam veterans. Mm-hmm. Could you give a little bit of background about that?
Certainly could. This is a great project. The ornamental fence that would be put up around Memorial Hall would replace a more utilitarian chain link fence that they have now. So that is where the bulk of the funding would go, would certainly add to the aesthetics of the space, and this is a pretty heavily traveled space there in Charlestown. There would be additional funding for lighting elements there. That's not where most of the funding is going, and it may be that there are additional funding needs in the future that they would either collect from the Browne Fund or collect from other donors, but we thought this might give them a start.
Thank you. The Puerto Rican Veterans Square Association, I've been there many times. I was there recently with the mayor during Memorial Day. And it's an outstanding memorial. It honors the proud legacy, heritage of the Puerto Rican Vietnam veterans. And it's such a historic monument. Can you give us a little bit of background on what that money will be used for?
Sure. So the The Browne Fund has previously awarded $47,500 to this project or kind of projects adjacent. The entire space, as you know, is a memorial in itself from start to finish. This, it is my understanding, would be maybe not the capstone, but the finishing touch of that memorial in having an ornamental gateway going into the space. And we have worked with them to come up with a design that we would be able to help them fund and that would work also within, other budgeted funds they might have.
Well, I think that's an excellent project. I know the Puerto Rican Vietnam veterans very well. I actually served when I was in Guantanamo. I was with the Puerto Rican Army National Guard, and I saw the courage and sacrifice of this great community. So I think it'll be money well spent. I think it's a great project, so I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Thanks very much.
The Frederick Douglass sculpture, could you give a little bit of background on that? That's on Tremont Street in Roxbury.
Yes, I certainly can. So this $50,000 would really go to prime the land around where the sculpture will be, prime the open space to get it ready for the actual monument. So this is all going for landscape architecture work. We've given them previously $250,000 for the actual fabrication and eventual installation of the work. So I know that the artist has been working. It is a remarkable monument. We've seen sketches of it and designs of it, and I know it's going to be something that community is very proud of.
Excellent. The Roxbury Path Forward Neighborhood Association is receiving some funding on a civil rights era project, public art at Gertrude House Park. Celebrate those that contributed to the civil rights era and beyond.
Yes. So this particular funding request was originally for substantially more. What we've done, however, there were some questions because this exists in an area that Browne Fund and Parks money has already gone to kind of develop, and so they wanted to do something else there. So what we did was we would ask that $20,000 go back and encourage the artists to work with the landscape architects and the community groups to make sure that they come up with something that is true to what they're attempting to accomplish while kind of speaking to all and meeting all concerns with individuals that might have those and work it within the current space that they have there at the park.
Thank you. Then the final one is the Freedom Trail Foundation, creation of public art in Faneuil Hall, honoring African Americans. Could you give us a little background about that?
Certainly. This is certainly an interesting project. The artist, Steve Locke, was selected as a part of the Boston Artists in Residency project and came up with this particular design. It would exist on the northeast corner of Faneuil Hall and would be inlaid into the ground. It would be in the outline of an auction block, one similar to those that were used during that period of time. As I said, it would be inset into the ground, but there would be a heating element attached to it. This is one of the things that certainly makes it interesting, that keeps it perpetually heated at least 98.6 degrees there. So it is a bit more of an extensive project. It's not simply laying something in the ground, but it is going to involve some digging and some electrical running and things like that.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you for coming down here and being prepared and knowing the information. And is there any final closing statements you'd like to provide us?
Other than just to say that these projects are, every year that these projects, come before the Browne Fund, they're special and they are unique. Sometimes we see repeats and sometimes we don't. These are no different. All of these projects are certainly important to the members of the community. They're important to us. We know they're important to you, and would appreciate further appropriation of them.
Yes, during the city council hearing, I'm going to discuss and provide an update to my colleagues on the council about the conversations we had. I'm going to recommend that we approve the funding for this. And at this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone here that would like to provide any public testimony. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.